Thank you very much for the presentation that I'm sure is going to elicit a lot of response and a lot of questions. It also is a good reminder of how a lot of times in Muslim discourse, intra-Muslim discourse, it is often posited that education is key. Education is going to solve all of our problems. If we only turn to education, things are going to be fine. Once you start doing it, you start understanding how difficult that is. And I think the story of Indonesia of the last several decades that you presented to us, from evolving from a sort of a traditional pesantren madrasa model to some sort of a state-sponsored Islamic education, and then evolving into full-fledged Islamic universities, and then from Islamic universities into Islamic universities that not only teach religion, but teach all kinds of different subjects, and how and what are the implications of all of that. We can see that there is a lot to learn and a lot to sort of spin our brains and minds around, because it's not as simple and it's not as easy as it may just seem when people say, well, let's just invest more in education and all of our problems are going to be solved. It is much more difficult than that. And of course, Muslims live in Muslim countries like Indonesia, live in certain contexts. So there are political, social, historical contexts that they also have to navigate while also trying to develop educational systems, reform them, integrate them across many levels, produce state bureaucracies, produce religious teachers, produce professionals at the same time. So there are different pressures and different demands from different sectors in the society. Some people want only those who will recite the Quran properly, and that's it, that's all they want. Others will say, well, we need technocrats, and we need engineers, and we need medical doctors, and others are going to say, well, we need a combination of the two. And so which way to go and how to do it, there's a lot of experiments. As we've seen, it really all of what Dr. Lukens-Bull presented to us is really a lot of experimentation that has been happening. With focus on state Islamic institution. Now in Indonesia, and he mentioned that, and I think it's important just to add before I open it up, there is also another sector, and that is a private Islamic educational sector. K to 12, actually pre-K, K to 12, and then higher education. That's in parallel to all of these efforts by the state to educate technocrats. And one of the examples that he mentioned is the example of one of the major Islamic social movements in Indonesia is Muhammadiyah, that to my knowledge has more than 120 universities. Imagine 120 universities run by this Islamic organization. So it is again another system that has its own logic, it has its own way of producing its own graduates. So you're talking about a huge system here of education that when people say, well, we're going to reform education, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, or let's just turn to education, and if we just did that, our problem is going to be solved. Once you start looking at all of this, it is very complex and very complicated. And so I think it's a very humbling experience and presentation at the same time to understand all of this. So